Good morning, channel friends. Today is a very special day because I'm in a new part of my company, new, but actually very old, which I've renovated to turn into a section of the warehouse. And now I'll explain. Over there is my workshop and office. All these years, I had everything together, so on one side I'd be sanding furniture, and on the other was my desk, with Emma, and while sanding, dust would get all over the papers, a real mess. So now that I can, I've decided to take this little space where we used to put brooms, hoovers, cleaning products. Basically, it was a great mess. I wanted to refurbish this area and do the flooring, so I had to raise it a bit. Well, quite a bit, actually, the lower part of the floor, which was all uneven. I put down some tiles, had this wall insulated with plasterboard. There's insulation behind it. I also had the builders, who always work for me, give it a quick skim. In this case, I had a slightly rougher finish done to match the old walls here. Obviously, these walls have suffered and are very damaged. In some places there was rising damp, but everything has been taken care of and now there won't be any more issues. Here I want to create the area where we'll simply put our desk, except for Franco, who has his own private desk. So, our desks and our cabinet for storing paper and, in any case, useful materials for making the tutorials. I like this space because it's very bright, but above all, I like it because I can do everything here. Everything I want, and today I'm going to show you some techniques and colors that I love. And we're going to dare, using brown and purple. Let's start. Let's start with the study. I know it's a bit boring, but it will be very useful. Since I have different walls, with different levels of roughness, here I have a very, very rough wall, made years ago with cement. I also have a crack that will later cover up in a way you'll see. Here I have another type of texture, of roughness, because they put up plasterboard. Can you hear it? And then they skimmed it, with a very rough finish. Here, on the other hand, it's just wall. Can you hear how it's different? I need a roller that allows me to work without too much effort, without straining my arms and hands, to work comfortably, and to save on product. So be careful. If you follow my guidelines for Magic Wall closely, I can guarantee and assure you that you'll save money, and you'll even be able to cover something like yellow, which is usually one of the hardest colors to cover, in just one coat. One coat, and sometimes a few touch-ups are needed. Don't take me too literally. Elisa said one coat and it is one coat, but it depends on the color underneath and the one you choose. Today, as I'm using Castellamonte, is similar to the color of the year, Mocha Mousse. It's similar, but I actually developed it earlier, last year. It's a color that reflects the fired ceramics you can find in this area. So, with this shade, I'll get full coverage with one roll. Why am I talking about rollers? Because we've designed these rollers not to be too large, as shown. They're perfect even for a woman's wrist, for those who do the work themselves, with a roller that has a slightly longer handle. Why? Because if I have this roller with a slightly wider diameter, a nap that's just a bit longer, and a handle that's a little longer, with a single stroke I can cover surfaces from the bottom all the way to the top, you see? Look here. Of course, I'll then need to go around with masking tape. That's normal. I have to do it because a proper finish needs to be done well, with a small brush around the edges. Maybe I'll use the Architetta brush. But always remember that I suggest materials that make your life easier so that you can use them on your own, so you can do the work independently. There's no need to call a decorator to use Magic Wall. It's so simple that if you follow my guidelines, you can do it yourself. I've already used this color in my father-in-law's restaurant and had some left over. I don't have a full 4 liters, just about a third left. Since the can isn't full, I don't need to pour it. I've already stirred it very, very well with my can opener. I pour some into my tray. I'll fill it up nicely, because I need to use it as a base coat on almost all the walls anyway. And one important thing you need to understand is that these 3 rollers, which you can also see up close, have different hair lengths. This one is shorter, this one is slightly longer, and this one is even longer. They're fantastic for achieving complete coverage, even on walls that are very, very rough. So, it's less effort if we use a roller rather than a brush, because with a brush we have to work with circular or sweeping motions, whereas with this roller it's much easier. Since it's slightly wider in diameter compared to the 10 centimeters one, it's easier to use, and the larger diameter allows us to cover more surface area without any effort. And moreover, you don't have to bear the weight of a much larger roller, which is usually the one we use for all the walls. What does that mean? It means that roller usually absorbs more paint. We risk making more of a mess, with more drips, whereas by using Magic Wall, which is used pure, with a roller that we can easily use without any effort and without making a mess. Even just doing a small alcove in about an hour becomes much easier. Obviously, this nap also allows you to cover up the floors of even the roughest walls. Look here, I've already loaded my handle with the longer nap roller. I load it up, and always remember, the longer the nap, the more paint the roller will absorb. So you always need to adjust. If you've only got a small area to paint, maybe drain a bit more paint from the roller. If you've got a larger area, use the roller when it's fuller. But always remember one thing. You should never drag the paint with the brush, and you should never drag the paint with the roller. This is a real rule for us decorators if we want to apply the paint well, avoid leaving marks, and save on materials. I mustn't dilute Magic Wall, always use it pure. I only dilute it in Sicily in August when it's 50 degrees, otherwise never. Use it pure as it's more effective, but above all, don't press on the roller. If I press on the roller, I squeeze out the paint, it'll be thin, you can see through it, and then I have to apply another coat. Let's avoid a second coat. Shall we do a test? Let's test on this light wall and on this yellow one. With one coat, see how much it covers. Of course, here, since it's a bit bumpy, I need to make sure, before moving on, that I've covered all the holes. If I can't see well, I'll use a spotlight. I'll shine a light on it, all right? Here I need to be sure that I've applied the paint once. That's it. I'm not applying another coat, that's all. But I can only be sure that one coat is enough if I apply it properly. Of course, if I leave it like this, I would need another one. So, one coat is enough only if you're 100% sure you've covered the whole surface properly. All right. Watch how it's done. You come here. I didn't press down, did you see? I didn't insist on pressing to completely empty the roller, no. I pick it up again like this. I carry on. I connect it to the part I've just done. Look here, the creaminess of Magic Wall is exceptional. You cover all the imperfections with this roll. If you make sure you've covered well and deeply, one coat is enough. Just one coat thanks to this exceptional roller, rough, with a long nap that covers the entire surface. But let's move on to the yellow wall. This is a mustard yellow, very beautiful. I'm sorry to cover it, but I have to because this is our project. And look. Don't tell me you need another coat if you apply the first one well. And yet I'm covering quite a strong yellow with just one coat. Of course, I need to make sure that my rough wall is 100% covered, even in the deepest spots. If some spots are too deep, I can also use the tip of the roller, which is obviously padded with pile, to get in there. And remove the texture, I smooth it out. And this is what I get. If I had black underneath or a very strong color, let's say a purple, and I couldn't cover it with one coat, of course I'd apply a second one, but just look at how much you've covered with just one. I haven't applied a base coat, which people usually tell you to do, to use a primer, because that's how you do a proper job. That's not the case when using my products. Don't buy other primers from other brands, because it's just a waste of money. My products have been designed to contain everything you need within them. Magic Wall is even water repellent, it smells nice, doesn't drip, and allows the wall to breathe. Why is that? Because the wall needs to breathe, it shouldn't trap water. Always remember this, the weight of water and the weight of air are different. So yes, the wall does breathe with Magic Wall, and no, it doesn't create a seal, it doesn't cause damp, it doesn't cause condensation. On the contrary, always remember this, it's an exceptional product, especially for exterior walls, because outside, the sun usually fades colors. Magic Wall has been specifically designed to prevent colors from fading, even on external surfaces exposed to sunlight. Watch how I do the edges easily thanks to the Architetta brush. It's a brush with slanted bristles, which means I don't have to mask off the surface to be precise. I come here, carefully place my brush down onto the surface, and I start creating a perfect line. Obviously, since the wall is rough, I need to apply more paint to achieve full coverage. But do use this brush, because it's fantastic, especially when you need to make these precise divisions in the corners of walls. It works well for both furniture and walls. Voila! Today, Pina and I are working with 4 to 6 legs on this wall. Why? Because I have some walls with cracks and damage. Of course, I don't want to hide them completely, but I want to emphasize them, to use them to my advantage. We're using Terra Magica, which is an exceptional product. It goes a long way, so with just a small amount, I can cover large surfaces. How do you use it? Instructions are on the back, so follow them well, but also start not being afraid to put in the components. In reality, even when you follow the recipe exactly, there's always some change. Today it's warmer, so maybe I'll add a drop more water, even if I'm not following the recipe exactly. What do I do? For example, today I'm not starting with the powder, but with the water. I pour a bit of it randomly into the bottom of my tray. Today I'm using this large tray with a plastic liner, not for any particular reason, but because I know that Terra Magica tends to stick a lot, and this way I can just throw it away. I put a bit of Terra Magica, just randomly, into my container. I'm finishing this off. There must have been about 2 fingers worth left in the jar. I'm also adding the protective coating. That's exactly how the recipe is made: water, powder, and protective coating. It helps to bind the components of Terra Magica and makes them stick perfectly to all surfaces. Terra Magica can be used both on walls and on furniture, even the shiniest ones. We can create a highly textured surface with Terra Magica, even on glossy furniture. That's what's great about it. You might say, why buy Terra Magica instead of Matte Eric Cream or Matte Eric Touch? First, Matte Eric Cream and Matte Eric Touch are ready-made pastes, good for stencils and other uses, but they come in smaller jars. They are pastes that dry out. On the other side, you buy the powder and make it yourself, creating it based on what you need. You don't have to use it all at once and it won't dry out. I'm going to add a bit more water. And what's more, it goes a long way and lets you create textured surfaces even on large walls, so we really optimize the cost. Also, the texture you get is somewhat in between Matte Eric Cream and Matte Eric Touch. It's not rough like Matte Eric Touch, and it's not runny like Matte Eric Cream. Now I'll take a spatula and try to achieve the consistency I want. By mixing the powder. There you go. Now you can start to see a perfect texture forming here. Remember that it dries gradually, so you need to use it within a short time, let's say an hour or 2 at most, because otherwise it becomes too stiff. Of course, if it's very hot while you're using it and it starts to dry out, you can always add a little drop of water to bring back some fluidity, as you like it. I like it this way, so with a consistency that stays fluid, and in a moment I'll start applying the base to the wall. On this wall, I'm going in both with Terra Magica, just applied freely with a spatula, and with the stencil. Watch. I'm only doing this because I want to cover up. Big crack. So I'm creating yet another surface, another textured layer, and then I'll come in here with the stencil. I don't do it everywhere, only where I need to. I use this stencil, which is fantastic. It gets rid of all the hassle and problems. It's called Delabré. It's for creating a base on the wall that already looks chipped. Since I have this crack and only need to work there, it's perfect for me, so I'm not even going to bother being too precise. I'm not even going to use masking tape. I just press it down with my hands and work on it like that. I don't want it to be perfect. The application doesn't need to be. I want the stencil to show through in some places and not in others. I need a finish that's very old-looking, worn, almost chipped. That's the kind of finish I'm going for. Also, when I remove the stencil, I get this effect and I use it to my advantage, blending the freshly applied part with some areas of the stencil. This helps me to achieve a stencil that merges perfectly with the texture I'm sanding on the wall. Obviously, the more you want to apply the textured paste, Terra Magica, to make the wall rough and textured, the more you need to work in layers. What does it mean? This is the first layer I do. Then it's up to you. You like it. Want to paint over it? Perfect. Want to add another layer? All right. Wait for it to dry and then start again. You'll have a textured surface on which you can place the stencil again to create a second textured base. The more you want to create a textured wall, the more you need to wait for each layer to dry. I slightly overlap the stencil I did before so that the join isn't visible, and now I continue. I lighten it up and, as you can see, the second section joins the first, and here too, if you want to remove the division, you can gently press it down. I'll carry on. This is the material you need to do the antiquing on this wall. What do we do? By using Corteccia and Caramello Salato, we'll create some very unique antiquing effects. I use them slightly diluted, so I put a bit of color Corteccia first, as it's darker into this cup, this bowl, and I also add a little water, because I actually want it to be a bit more fluid. For about 2 fingers worth of color, I've added roughly 2 or 3 tablespoons of water. I mix it so that it's nice, soft, and velvety. And then I start by working on the upper part of the wall. Keep a molly sponge nearby. I've broken mine in half to make it easier to handle. A damp microfiber cloth and a water spray bottle might also come in handy. I've got this garden sprayer, which sprays quite a lot of water, so it's perfect for me in this case. Come with me. I'm gently starting to apply the color to the upper part. I gently massage the Corteccia color, slightly diluted, and I lightly mist the color. And as you can see, it runs. With our sponge, I work the surface. And I hold it there. I start from the top because it runs downwards. So it's essential to work in several layers. Here I need to make the junction box for the pipes. and I slowly work the surface. I moisten it, wait for it to run. And with the sponge, I keep working the surface. I don't want to see a pronounced drip like you can see here. I'm not interested in seeing the paint running down. I want to see the paint blending into the wall. So, I remove the drip like this. I don't like this, so I soften it in this way. Now I pick up some more paint, emphasize it, and let it run. I let the paint slide gently. And then I move on so that it starts to dry gradually before applying the second layer of paint. You can see it starting to run, and this creates yet another kind of shading. A shading that will now dry and create exactly what I need, a wall with a slightly aged effect. I move over here and start working on the initial part across the whole surface. On this side, I let a more pronounced, visible streak of paint run down, as if it were a crack in the wall. I let it drip, and in the meantime, I move forward, like this. The paint changes as I go along. Here I create another distinct, separate drip that splits the wall and then runs all the way down, emphasizing the texture of the paint up to here. And I do the same in another spot here. I want the wall to have this sharp, central drip. Oxidized. Start spraying and the water runs, and it will create streaks on the wall that we will then fix in place. To create a much more realistic shading, not one made with paint. It should look as if it was made by time, by wear. If your sponge is too loaded with paint, make sure to lighten it, even by rinsing it in the bucket. This way you can clear the excess easier. Let's continue with our crack in the wall. It needs to be fixed in place, so now, to set it, we'll use the hairdryer. From the bottom upwards, I set it in place, so it doesn't drip, and I stop the colour. Caramello Salato in the same bowl where I previously put Corteccia, because this way the colours blend and look much less different. I do the same thing, creating a crack in the wall with a different colour, so a more orange one. I'm not going to overlap the previous, darker vein, I leave it there and just get close to it. I want this more orange vein to start from here. It starts to drip, it begins to create a new shade, and I let it go until it reaches the bottom, then I set it at the bottom. I do the same thing on this spot. Working with the sponge on the wall. Letting the shades blend together. Here I want to see more orange, and here I want to see more Corteccia. And if I can, I also use the hairdryer, so I can set the colours. I add a drop of dark sand into the bowl where I've used Corteccia and Caramello Salato to mix colours. Because it's true, I need a lighter shade, but one that blends with my wall. 2 spoonfuls. If you don't have dark sand and want to use another colour, don't worry. Because, of course, by blending it onto the wall, it will take on the shade of the other colours. Look here. I do this in some spots. This is the light, the brightness that gives depth and therefore adds depth to other colours. This step is essential, but it mustn't be too overpowering or it will cover everything. I do very little of it here at the beginning. I start with the dripping. I let the colour work on the wall, and of course I'll fix it in place shortly. I pick up the colour from the corner, as if it were coming off. From the wall. I let it run just a little and then fix the shade. And I do the same thing in other spots as well. I go here. It's beautiful because here you can see all the colours mixed together. All the different shades are blended. Always remember one thing, the colour changes a lot once it dries. So be careful, all right? Don't overdo it because you need all the nuances. Here we go from light all the way to Caramello Salato, then you notice this sandier part, blended with the other tones. Here it's lighter, here it's darker. It's essential at this stage not to mix all the colours together, and be careful not to let it drip too much. In the meantime, I dry it to set colours. I step back and view the wall from afar because only then can I tell if it's even and consistent. I don't use this sponge much, but it's extremely important and you should always keep an eye on it if you need to do walls like this. It's called a half-moon sponge. I've run it under water, wrung it out thoroughly, and even wrapped it in a towel to squeeze it even more. In my hand, I've got a simple can opener. I take a bit of dark sand and spread it onto my half-moon as if it were a piece of bread. This helps me to create something very delicate, ethereal. I go to the areas where I want to highlight my textured stencil and gently stroke. I dab off the excess onto the cardboard and do this dry brush technique with the half-moon sponge. Remember, be gentle and only in certain spots, because this shade is meant to highlight only what's on the outside. Obviously, if you make a mistake, you can always wash it off with the sponge, since the wall is washable. But look at this, it's stunning, like lace. Everything on the outside is brought out by our sponge. I'm moving up. I go towards the most prominent lace and blend it in. You see, it takes just a tiny bit of color to achieve this beautiful shading. A slightly cool tone, in contrast to the others used. And of course, I won't apply it everywhere, only on the aged part. I'll blend it out. I won't pick up any more color with the sponge. I wait until it's completely used up, and then I'll stop at a precise spot, where the stencil ends. Because, of course, the stencil has this textured finish. It's lacy, whereas the rest of the wall doesn't have it. It's simply aged. Look at how stunning it is here as well. I'm going to fade the color into the wall, as if it's ending here, and I'll highlight a few more parts of the lace, but less and less each time. Now I'll finish off the lower part, step back, look at it from over there because the light needs to hit it, and then I'll know if it's done. Afterwards, I'll get everything cleaned up, tidy everything up, and start thinking about how to furnish the new office. You'll see it once it's finished. This restyling is finished as well. Ah, no, I wish it were my desk, but it's not my desk. Because in this office, Franco is in charge. So I'm at the central desk together with Emma and a few others. And instead, Franco is there on his own, nice and relaxed, with his back to the wall I made with so much love. But I have to say, Franco, you do like it. So, this is just to say that this lovely corner was recreated to go with this beautiful desk I made quite some time ago, although unfortunately, there's no tutorial for it. There's no tutorial because I made it during one of my courses that I run on Fridays. Sometimes on Fridays I host these courses where people come to try out different techniques and work on large pieces, so not just little tables or bedside cabinets, but on significant pieces of furniture. That time, there were 4 of them working on this desk, and perhaps you can't see it clearly yet, but on this surface a textured stencil was used with Terra Magica, and the same colors that you see here were used. On the outside of the desk, that is, Lucky Forest, there are washes of grey and black. I created this effect specifically to save the top of this desk, which no longer had, in fact, the classic embossed leather typical of desks from that era, as it was completely ruined. So the wood remained as wood. I added a nice extra glass, and the center, the heart, was worked like this. And I must say that Lucky Forest goes very well with these colors, so I started from afar to tell you that you shouldn't be afraid to combine tones like the ones I've used today. On this wall, where we've used Corteccia and Castellamonte, very warm earthy tones with other types of color. For example, if you look around now, you'll see there's a lampshade with a blue light, pepper blue, another piece of furniture in pepper blue, which we made a long time ago, this desk, which is Lucky Forest, and down at the end some furniture that's in Russia. So, in the same room we've placed different pieces of furniture with different tones, all blended together by these warm Castellamonte coloured walls. Actually, there's still one piece left to do in this office, which would be my desk, but as always, I gave priority to Franco. And so we find ourselves working on this piece, which is a bit neglected, while you have a perfect desk. But look, Franco, how beautiful these are. These handles are stunning. There are some really fantastic antique handles, with lots of drawers. All Francos. Joking aside, have a good look up close at the workmanship. Because actually we used this technique here to fix that ugly crack that was in the wall. And we used this technique to make sure it was brought up to date with the rest of the techniques on this wall. So these washes have created a very modern, very distinctive rust effect, which suits this warm, working environment. So I no longer have the green Elisa office like I used to. This is now Castellamonte and matches the wooden ceiling. Maybe this winter will work side by side. Imagine the videos we'll make and the welcoming atmosphere. Franco, what do you think? But you always want to be by the sea. So, let me know in the comments if you liked it, and dare to use warm tones on your walls too. Castellamonte is the color of the year. It's very similar to the pant one called Mocha Mousse, but I created it first. I brought out the color of the year. I always say this because it almost seems like we're trying to match it, but no, actually it's just very similar in tone, so be bold because it's beautiful, it's warm, and it's very, very glamorous. Remember that magic paint and magic wall colors can't be found on any website except. The official website is elisayahome.com or from authorized retailers listed on the magicpaint.it website. You won't find them in any shop that sells paints. Those are imitations, especially online. They're not on Amazon, only on the official website. Goodbye.